Blood turned to ice in Virginia O'Malley's veins as Dr. Peterson's words hung in the air like a death sentence. "I'm sorry, Miss O'Malley, but you'll never bear children of your own." She gripped the edge of the wooden examination table, her knuckles white, as the doctor continued his clinical assessment in the small medical office on the edge of Redemption Springs, Arizona Territory, 1885. "Women in your condition," he continued, adjusting his spectacles with clinical detachment, "would be advised to adjust their expectations accordingly. Perhaps consider a position as a schoolteacher or companion. Marriage prospects, of course, will be limited." Virginia stared at the worn floorboards, fighting back tears that threatened to spill down her cheeks. At 23, she had accepted many harsh realities about life on the frontier, but this verdict struck at the very core of her identity as a woman. "I understand, doctor," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "What exactly is my condition?" Dr. Peterson cleared his throat. "The scarring from your fever last winter has damaged your womb. It's quite extensive. I've seen similar cases, and none have resulted in successful pregnancies." He closed his medical journal with a snap that felt like the closing of a coffin lid. "I'm truly sorry." Virginia nodded mechanically, gathering her shawl around her shoulders. The doctor's words echoed in her mind as she paid his fee and stepped out into the dusty main street of Redemption Springs. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the road, and the usual bustle of townsfolk going about their business seemed distant and unreal. "Miss Virginia," called Mrs. Holloway from the general store. "Will you be joining the quilting circle this evening?" Virginia forced a smile. "Not tonight, Mrs. Holloway. I'm feeling rather tired." She quickened her pace, desperate to reach the sanctuary of her small home at the edge of town before her composure crumbled completely. The modest one-room cabin had been her haven since arriving in Redemption Springs 2 years ago after the death of her parents. She had come west with dreams of a fresh start, perhaps finding a husband and raising a family of her own. Now those dreams lay shattered at her feet. Once inside, Virginia sank onto her narrow bed and finally allowed the tears to flow freely. In this world, what future awaited a barren woman? Her entire life, she had been raised to believe a woman's highest calling was motherhood. Without that possibility, what value did she have? Who would want her now? The sound of approaching hoofbeats interrupted her despair. Virginia hastily wiped her tears and moved to the window. A lone rider was approaching, the setting sun silhouetting his broad-shouldered frame. She recognized the distinctive gait of the horse. It was Morgan Hayes, whose ranch bordered the eastern edge of town. Virginia quickly splashed water on her face from the basin and pinched her cheeks to bring some color back. Morgan Hayes was not a man she wished to appear weak before. Their encounters had always been brief but cordial. As the town's seamstress, she had mended his shirts and jackets on numerous occasions, but they had never exchanged more than polite pleasantries. A firm knock sounded at her door. Virginia smoothed her skirts and opened it to find Morgan standing on her porch, hat in hand, his tall frame blocking the setting sun. "Miss O'Malley," he said, his deep voice resonating in the quiet evening. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all, Mr. Hayes," she replied, proud that her voice revealed none of her earlier distress. "What brings you by this evening?" Morgan shifted his weight, appearing uncharacteristically uncertain. The usual confidence that the successful rancher carried seemed diminished. "I was hoping to speak with you about a matter of some importance," he said. "May I come in for a moment?" Virginia hesitated, acutely aware of the impropriety of allowing a man into her home without a chaperone. Yet something in Morgan's earnest expression compelled her to step aside. "Briefly, Mr. Hayes, I wouldn't want to invite gossip." Morgan ducked his head as he entered the small cabin, his presence immediately filling the modest space. At 32, he was in his prime sun-bronzed skin stretched over strong features, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to see more than most. His dark hair was neatly trimmed, though a few strands fell across his forehead, giving him a boyish quality despite his imposing physique. "I'll come straight to the point, Miss O'Malley," he said, standing awkwardly in the center of her room. "I've recently purchased the old Peterson property to expand my ranch. The main house needs considerable work, including new curtains, bedspreads, and various other textiles." Virginia relaxed slightly. This was business then. "I'd be happy to help with the sewing, Mr. Hayes. When would you like me to start?" Morgan cleared his throat. "That's part of why I'm here. The job is substantial, and rather than have you travel back and forth, I was hoping you might consider staying at the ranch while you complete the work. My housekeeper, Mrs. Winters, would be there as chaperone, of course." Virginia considered the offer. A long-term sewing commission would provide much-needed income, and a change of scenery might help clear her mind after today's devastating news. "That seems reasonable," she said cautiously. "How long do you anticipate the work taking?" "Several weeks, at least," Morgan replied. "There are 12 rooms in total that need attention." Virginia's eyebrows rose. "That's quite an undertaking." "The pay would reflect the scope of the work," he assured her quickly. "And," he hesitated, "I thought perhaps the change might do you good." Virginia stiffened. "What do you mean by that, Mr. Hayes?" Morgan's expression grew troubled. "Forgive me for being forward, but I saw you leaving Dr. Peterson's office today. You seemed distressed." Heat rushed to Virginia's cheeks. Had the whole town witnessed her moment of vulnerability? Would everyone soon know of her barrenness? The thought was unbearable. "My health is my own concern, Mr. Hayes," she said coldly. Morgan immediately looked contrite. "Of course, I didn't mean to pry. I only meant to offer an opportunity that might provide a temporary diversion, nothing more." The sincerity in his voice softened Virginia's defensiveness. Perhaps he was right. Immersing herself in work would be better than sitting alone with her thoughts. "Very well, Mr. Hayes, I accept your offer. When would you like me to start?" Relief flooded his features. "Would tomorrow be too soon? I can send my wagon for you and your things in the morning." "Tomorrow will be fine," Virginia agreed. "I'll be ready by 8 o'clock. Morgan nodded, replacing his hat as he moved toward the door. "Until tomorrow then, Miss O'Malley." After he left, Virginia began gathering her sewing supplies and personal belongings. Whatever her future held, at least the next few weeks were settled. And if her nights were spent crying into her pillow, well, no one at the Hayes Ranch would need to know. True to his word, Morgan sent a wagon the following morning. Virginia was surprised to see him driving it himself rather than sending a ranch hand. "Good morning, Miss O'Malley," he called, jumping down to help with her trunks. "I trust you slept well." Virginia had not, in fact, slept more than a few fitful hours, but she nodded politely. "Well enough, thank you." The journey to the Hayes Ranch took nearly 2 hours, winding through rolling grasslands dotted with cattle. Morgan pointed out landmarks along the way, his voice carrying easily over the clatter of the wagon wheels. "The ranch has been in my family for 15 years now," he explained. "My father started with just 50 acres and a dream. Before he passed 5 years ago, we'd expanded to over 2,000 acres. Adding the Peterson property will give us access to the northern water rights we've needed." Virginia listened with genuine interest. She had heard rumors of the Hayes Ranch's success, but had never known the details. "Your father would be proud of what you've accomplished." Morgan's hands tightened momentarily on the reins. "I hope so. It hasn't always been easy, especially since my mother passed when I was just a boy." "I'm sorry," Virginia said softly. "I lost both my parents to influenza 2 years ago." "It's what brought me west." Morgan glanced at her, genuine sympathy in his eyes. "Then we have that in common, though I've had more time to build something new from my loss." As they crested a hill, the Hayes Ranch came into view. Virginia couldn't suppress a gasp of appreciation. The main house was an impressive 2-story structure with a wide veranda wrapping around 3 sides. Several outbuildings, barns, and corrals formed a neat compound. In the distance, a small bunkhouse sat near what appeared to be a cookhouse for the ranch hands. "It's beautiful," she said honestly. Morgan's expression softened with pride. It's home. The Peterson house your project is just beyond that grove of cottonwoods. He pointed to a smaller but still substantial house about a quarter-mile from the main ranch house. As they pulled up to the main house, a stout woman with iron-gray hair emerged onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mrs. Winters," Morgan called, "this is Miss Virginia O'Malley, who'll be handling the sewing work for the Peterson house." Mrs. Winters assessed Virginia with shrewd eyes before breaking into a warm smile. "Welcome to Hayes Ranch, Miss O'Malley. I've prepared the blue room for you. I hope you'll find it comfortable." Virginia was shown to a charming bedroom on the second floor, far more spacious than her cabin in town. After freshening up, she joined Morgan and Mrs. Winters for a tour of the Peterson house, which indeed needed considerable work. The previous owners had left it in disrepair, with faded wallpaper, worn floors, and not a curtain to be found on any of the dozen windows. "I know it looks daunting," Morgan admitted as they walked through the empty rooms, "but I have carpenters and painters arriving next week. Your job is to make it feel like a home once they've finished." Virginia ran her hand along a dusty windowsill, already envisioning the possibilities. "It has good bones. When the work is complete, it will be lovely." Morgan watched her with an expression Virginia couldn't quite decipher. "I'm glad you think so." Over the next few days, Virginia settled into a comfortable routine at the Hayes Ranch. Each morning after breakfast, she would accompany Morgan to the Peterson house, where she would take measurements and make sketches for her designs. In the afternoons, she would work on cutting patterns and beginning the actual sewing, often sitting on the veranda of the main house where the light was good. Mrs. Winters proved to be excellent company, regaling Virginia with stories of the early days of the ranch while they worked together in the evenings. Gradually, Virginia found herself relaxing, the pain of Dr. Peterson's diagnosis receding somewhat in the face of purposeful work and pleasant companionship. On the fourth day, Virginia was measuring the dining room windows at the Peterson house when she heard a commotion outside. Looking through the dusty glass, she saw Morgan dismounting from his horse, his face grim as he spoke to one of his ranch hands. Something was clearly wrong. Virginia hurried outside. "Is everything all right, Mr. Hayes?" Morgan turned to her, concern etched on his features. "We've got trouble with rustlers on the North Range. 3 of my men spotted them driving off a dozen head of prime cattle." "That's terrible. Will you go after them?" "I have to," Morgan said, checking the revolver at his hip. "Jackson's gathering a few more men now." "We should be back by nightfall." Virginia felt a surprising surge of worry. "Please be careful, Mr. Hayes. Rustlers are desperate men." Something flickered in Morgan's eyes at her concern. "I will, Miss O'Malley. Would you mind informing Mrs. Winters that I won't be back for supper?" Before Virginia could respond, several riders galloped into the yard, led by a tall man she recognized as Jackson, Morgan's foreman. "Ready when you are, boss," Jackson called. Morgan swung back into the saddle with fluid grace. "We'll return as soon as we can," he assured Virginia, then turned his horse and rode out with his men, dust billowing behind them. All afternoon, Virginia found herself unable to concentrate on her work, her thoughts constantly returning to Morgan and his men. The dangers of confronting cattle thieves were well known. Many such encounters ended in bloodshed. By evening, with no sign of the men's return, Virginia's anxiety had only increased. She and Mrs. Winters sat in the kitchen, barely touching the meal the housekeeper had prepared. "Don't you fret, Miss O'Malley," Mrs. Winters said, though her own worry was evident. "Mr. Hayes knows how to handle himself, been doing it since he was just a boy." "Has this happened before?" Virginia asked. Mrs. Winters nodded. "A few times. The Hayes brand is known for quality. Makes the cattle tempting targets." Shortly after 9 o'clock, they heard horses approaching. Virginia rushed to the window, relief washing over her as she recognized Morgan's broad shoulders among the returning riders. Her relief was short-lived, however, when she realized he was slumped forward in the saddle, one of his men riding close beside him as if to prevent him from falling. "Mrs. Winters," she called urgently. "Mr. Hayes is injured." They hurried outside as the men reached the house. Jackson and another ranch hand were carefully helping Morgan from his horse. Even in the dim light from the house, Virginia could see a dark stain spreading across his left shoulder. "Rustlers got away," Morgan said through gritted teeth as they helped him toward the house, but not before one of them got off a lucky shot. "To the study," Mrs. Winters directed. "Miss O'Malley, fetch my medical kit from the pantry, second shelf from the top." Virginia rushed to comply, her heart pounding. When she returned to the study, Morgan was seated in a leather chair, his shirt being carefully cut away by Mrs. Winters to reveal the wound beneath. "Bullet went clean through the shoulder," the housekeeper announced. "That's a blessing, at least." "Miss O'Malley, I'll need your help. These old hands aren't as steady as they once were." For the next hour, Virginia assisted as Mrs. Winters cleaned and bandaged Morgan's wound. The bullet had indeed passed through without hitting bone or major blood vessels, but the wound was painful and had bled profusely. Morgan endured the treatment stoically, only occasionally letting a hiss of pain escape his clenched teeth. When Virginia handed him a glass of whiskey, their fingers brushed momentarily, and she was struck by the warmth of his skin despite his injury. "You should rest now," Mrs. Winters said when they had finished. "Miss O'Malley and I will help you upstairs." Morgan shook his head. "The sofa here will do. I don't think I could manage the stairs tonight." Virginia helped Mrs. Winters make up the sofa with clean linens while Jackson brought in extra pillows. Once Morgan was settled as comfortably as possible, the ranch hands departed to spread the news to the bunkhouse, and Mrs. Winters went to prepare a broth. Virginia found herself alone with Morgan, who was pale but alert. "Can I get you anything else, Mr. Hayes?" she asked softly. Morgan's blue eyes met hers. "Would you sit with me a while? The company would be welcome." Virginia settled into a nearby chair, suddenly aware of the intimacy of the moment. "Did you recognize the rustlers?" she asked, seeking a safe topic. Morgan sighed. "Not all of them. But one was definitely Seth Blackwater. He used to work for the Carson outfit before he was fired for stealing. He's been trouble ever since." "Will you report this to the sheriff first thing tomorrow?" Morgan confirmed. "Though Blackwater and his kind are good at disappearing when the law comes looking." They fell into a comfortable silence, broken only by the ticking of the mantel clock and the occasional pop from the fireplace. Morgan's eyes began to droop, the combined effects of pain, exhaustion, and whiskey taking their toll. "You should sleep," Virginia said gently, Morgan's gaze fixed on her face with unexpected intensity. "Thank you for your help tonight, Virginia." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent an unexpected shiver through her. "Of course, Mr. Hayes, anyone would have done the same." "Morgan," he corrected. "After tonight, I think we can dispense with formalities, don't you?" Virginia smiled. "Rest well, Morgan." As she rose to leave, his hand caught hers. "I mean it, Virginia, thank you." The warmth of his fingers around hers lingered long after she had retired to her room for the night. The following days brought a shift in Virginia's relationship with Morgan. As she helped change his bandages and brought him meals while he recovered, their conversations grew longer and more personal. Virginia found herself sharing stories of her childhood in Pennsylvania, her journey west after her parents' deaths, and her hopes of building a new life in Arizona territory. Morgan, in turn, spoke of his dreams for the ranch, his struggles after his father's death, and his determination to create something lasting from their shared vision. What Virginia did not share was Dr. Peterson's diagnosis. Each time their conversations drifted toward future plans or family, she carefully steered them elsewhere. The easy camaraderie they were developing would surely change if Morgan knew of her condition. What man wanted a wife who could never bear his children? The thought of seeing pity or worse, disinterest in Morgan's eyes was unbearable. A week after the shooting incident, Morgan was well enough to resume light duties around the ranch. Virginia continued her work on the Peterson house textiles, now with a clearer understanding of Morgan's vision for the property. "I was thinking these would work well for the parlor," she said one afternoon, showing him several fabric samples she had ordered from the mercantile in town. "The blue brings out the color in the tile around the fireplace." Morgan examined the samples, standing close enough that Virginia could detect the clean scent of soap and leather that always seemed to surround him. "They're perfect," he said, his voice low. "You have a real gift for this, Virginia." She flushed with pleasure at his praise. "Thank you, it's coming together nicely. The painters have done wonders with the walls." Morgan hesitated, then asked, "Would you join me for a ride tomorrow? There's something I'd like to show you, and I could use the exercise after being cooped up with this shoulder." Virginia was surprised by the invitation. "Are you sure you're well enough? Mrs. Winters gave me her blessing this morning," he said with a grin. "Said I was becoming an insufferable patient," Virginia laughed. "Then I would be delighted to join you." The following morning dawned clear and crisp, perfect for riding. Virginia wore her best riding habit, a deep green wool that complemented her auburn hair. When she came downstairs, she found Morgan waiting in the foyer, looking more handsome than usual in a clean shirt and vest. "You look lovely," he said, a note of genuine admiration in his voice. "Thank you," Virginia replied, suddenly shy. "Is your shoulder comfortable enough for riding?" "It's much improved," he assured her. "I've had Jackson saddle Daisy for you. She's gentle but sure-footed." Daisy proved to be a beautiful Palomino mare with a sweet disposition. Once they were mounted, Morgan led them away from the ranch, heading west toward a line of distant hills. "Where are we going?" Virginia asked as they rode side by side across the open grassland. "There's a spot on the property I've always found. Special," Morgan replied. "I thought you might appreciate it too." They rode for nearly an hour, the land gradually rising as they approached the hills. The motion of the horse beneath her and the open sky above filled Virginia with a sense of freedom she rarely experienced. She stole glances at Morgan, admiring the confident way he sat his horse despite his healing injury. Finally, they crested a rise and Morgan reined in his mount. "Here we are." Virginia gasped at the view that spread before them. From this vantage point, they could see for miles in every direction. The Hayes Ranch lay below them, buildings looking like miniatures from this distance. Beyond it, the land rolled away toward distant mountains, patches of forest interspersed with meadows and the silver ribbon of a river. "It's breathtaking," Virginia said softly. Morgan dismounted and came to help her down from Daisy. His hands lingered at her waist slightly longer than necessary, and Virginia felt her pulse quicken at his touch. "My father brought me here when I was 12 years old," Morgan said, leading her to a flat rock where they could sit comfortably. "He told me that someday all the land we could see would be part of the Hayes Ranch." He smiled at the memory. "I thought he was dreaming impossible dreams back then. But you've made it happen," Virginia observed. Morgan nodded. "Most of it. The Peterson property was the last major piece." He turned to look at her directly. "Do you know why I wanted to show you this place, Virginia?" She shook her head, suddenly aware of how alone they were, how close he was sitting. "Because when I'm here, I can see possibilities," he said quietly. "I can imagine futures that might seem impossible from ground level." Virginia's heart began to race. "What kind of futures?" Morgan took her hand in his. "When I first asked you to come to the ranch, it wasn't just about the sewing." Virginia stared at him in confusion. "What do you mean?" "I've admired you since you first came to Redemption Springs," he admitted. "Your strength in starting over after losing your family, your skill with your craft, your kindness to everyone you meet." Virginia felt heat rising to her cheeks. "Morgan, please let me finish," he said gently. "I've been looking for the right moment, the right words. After being shot, I realized life is too uncertain to wait for perfect timing." He shifted to face her more directly, still holding her hand. "Virginia O'Malley, over these past weeks, my admiration has grown into something deeper." I find myself thinking of you constantly, wanting to make you smile, wanting to build a future with you by my side. Virginia's free hand flew to her mouth. Morgan, you can't possibly. I can, and I do, he said firmly. I'm asking if you might consider a courtship between us, with the intention of marriage if our feelings continue to grow. Tears sprang to Virginia's eyes, but they were not tears of joy. The cruel reality of Dr. Peterson's diagnosis crashed down upon her like a physical weight. You don't understand, she whispered. You can't want me. Morgan's brow furrowed in confusion. Why would you say such a thing? Virginia pulled her hand from his and stood, walking a few paces away. Her back to him, she forced out the words that would surely end his interest. The day you came to my cabin, the reason I was upset leaving Dr. Peterson's office. She drew a shaky breath. He informed me that I can never have children. The fever I suffered last winter left me barren. The silence that followed her declaration seemed to stretch for an eternity. Virginia couldn't bear to turn around, to see the disappointment that must surely be written across Morgan's face. What rancher didn't want sons to inherit his land, daughters to bring joy to his home? Virginia, Morgan's voice came softly from directly behind her. She hadn't heard him approach. Look at me, please. Reluctantly, she turned, expecting to see pity in his eyes. Instead, she found only tenderness and unwavering resolve. Do you think that changes how I feel about you? He asked. Virginia blinked in confusion. How could it not? Every man wants children, especially a man with a legacy like yours. Morgan shook his head. What I want is a partner, Virginia, someone to share my life with, my dreams, my struggles, my joys. If children are part of that journey, wonderful. If not. He reached for her hands again. There are many ways to build a family, many children in need of homes. Virginia stared at him in disbelief. You would consider that, taking in orphans, why not? He asked simply. I've built everything else in my life. Why not build a family in the same way with purpose and love? Tears spilled down Virginia's cheeks. The doctor said women like me have no future, that marriage prospects would be limited. Anger flashed briefly in Morgan's eyes. Then the doctor is a fool. Your worth isn't measured by your ability to bear children, Virginia. He cupped her face gently in his hands. I'm asking to court you because of who you are, your spirit, your heart, your mind. Everything else is secondary. Virginia felt as though a great weight was lifting from her shoulders. Could it really be this simple? Could this man truly want her, knowing she could never give him biological children? You're sure? She whispered. Truly sure. Morgan's answer was to lower his lips to hers in a gentle kiss that spoke more eloquently than words ever could. When he pulled back, his eyes were shining with certainty. You're my future, Virginia O'Malley. Children or no children, you're the woman I want by my side. For the first time since receiving her diagnosis, Virginia felt hope blossoming in her heart. She reached up to touch Morgan's face, marveling at this unexpected turn her life had taken. Then yes, she said softly. I would be honored to court you, Morgan Hayes. His answering smile was brighter than the sun overhead. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Virginia's life. Their courtship progressed with the blessing of Mrs. Winters, who admitted she had suspected Morgan's intentions from the beginning. Never seen the man take such an interest in curtains and bedspreads before, she commented dryly, but with obvious approval. Virginia continued her work on the Peterson house, now understanding that Morgan intended it as a wedding gift should their courtship lead to marriage. The knowledge lent special meaning to every stitch she placed, every design decision she made. In the evenings, they would often sit together on the veranda, discussing books, sharing stories, or simply enjoying each other's company in comfortable silence. On Sundays, they rode into town together for church services, their relationship becoming common knowledge in Redemption Springs. Not everyone approved. Virginia overheard Mrs. Holloway whispering to another woman after services one Sunday. Such a shame for Morgan Hayes to settle for a barren woman. The Hayes Ranch deserves an heir. The words stung, but when Virginia tearfully recounted them to Morgan on their ride home, his response was immediate and fierce. "Let them talk," he said firmly. "They don't know the first thing about what makes a family or a legacy. I'll build mine my way with the woman I love." It was the first time he had spoken of love, and Virginia's heart soared at the declaration. As summer turned to autumn, Morgan formally proposed during a picnic beside the creek that ran through the eastern edge of the ranch. Virginia accepted without hesitation, secure now in the knowledge that her inability to bear children truly did not matter to the man she had come to love deeply. They set a wedding date for the first week of November, before winter made travel difficult for guests. Virginia worked tirelessly on her wedding gown, a creation of ivory silk with delicate beadwork around the collar and cuffs. 2 weeks before the wedding, Virginia was putting the finishing touches on the gown when she was overcome by a wave of nausea so intense she barely made it to the wash basin before becoming violently ill. Mrs. Winters found her there, pale and trembling. "You've been pushing yourself too hard, child," the housekeeper scolded gently, helping Virginia to a chair. "Wedding jitters and exhaustion, that's all this is." Virginia nodded weakly, but over the next few days, the morning sickness continued. After the 4th consecutive morning of illness, Mrs. Winters gave her a searching look. "Miss Virginia," she said carefully, "forgive me for asking, but is there any possibility you might be expecting?" Virginia laughed bitterly. "That's impossible, Mrs. Winters, doctor." Peterson was quite clear about my condition. The housekeeper pursed her lips. "Doctors have been wrong before, my dear, and I've seen enough pregnancies in my time to recognize the signs." A tiny flicker of impossible hope ignited in Virginia's heart. But how? The doctor said the scarring was extensive. "The human body is a mysterious thing," Mrs. Winters said simply, "and miracles do happen." Afraid to believe, yet unable to dismiss the possibility entirely, Virginia agreed to visit Dr. Peterson again. Morgan insisted on accompanying her, waiting anxiously outside the examination room while the doctor conducted his examination. When Virginia emerged, her face was ashen with shock. Morgan was immediately at her side, his arm around her waist to steady her. "Virginia, what is it? What did he say?" She turned to him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "He says I'm with child, about 6 weeks along." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "He can't explain it, says it shouldn't be possible with the scarring I have." Morgan's expression transformed from concern to wonder. "A baby, our baby." Virginia nodded, still dazed. "He says there are risks. The scarring could complicate things. But for now, everything appears normal." Morgan pulled her into his arms, heedless of who might see them on the main street of Redemption Springs. "Then we'll face those risks together," he murmured into her hair. "Just as we would have faced a future without children together." Dr. Peterson emerged from his office, looking as confounded as Virginia felt. "Miss O'Malley, Mr. Hayes, I must emphasize that this pregnancy is highly unusual given Miss O'Malley's condition. I wouldn't. That is to say, I wouldn't place too much hope." Morgan cut him off with a raised hand. "With all due respect, doctor, you've already told my fiancée once what she couldn't do. Perhaps it's time to focus on what she can." The doctor flushed but nodded curtly before retreating into his office. As they drove back to the ranch, Virginia's shock gradually gave way to cautious joy. "Do you really think we can do this? Have a healthy baby despite the risks?" Morgan's hand covered hers. "I believe we can do anything together, Virginia, but remember what I said before: children or no children, you're my future. This baby would be a blessing beyond measure, but you are the miracle I never expected to find." Virginia leaned against his shoulder, tears of happiness blurring her vision. "I love you, Morgan Hayes. And I love you, Virginia O'Malley, soon to be Virginia Hayes." Their wedding proceeded as planned in early November. Virginia's gown had to be slightly adjusted to accommodate her still flat stomach, though she and Morgan had decided to keep the pregnancy private for now, given the uncertain prognosis. The ceremony was held in the newly renovated Peterson house, which Virginia had transformed into a warm and inviting home. Reverend Thomas officiated as Morgan and Virginia exchanged vows before a gathering of friends and ranch employees. The love shining in Morgan's eyes as he promised to cherish her in plenty and in want, in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health, brought tears to Virginia's eyes. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Thomas declared. "Mr. Hayes, you may kiss your bride." Morgan's kiss was tender yet passionate, a promise of the life they would build together. The assembled guests erupted in cheers and applause. The celebration continued well into the evening, with dancing in the spacious parlor and a feast prepared by Mrs. Winters and her kitchen helpers. Virginia found herself the center of attention as townspeople and neighboring ranchers offered congratulations and good wishes. Even Mrs. Holloway seemed to have reconsidered her earlier judgment. "You've made a beautiful bride, Mrs. Hayes," she said, the new name still strange to Virginia's ears. "Morgan is a fortunate man." "I'm the fortunate one," Virginia replied sincerely. As the evening wore on, Morgan found his new wife sitting by the fireplace, resting after a lively dance. He knelt beside her chair, his voice low. "How are you feeling? Not too tired?" Virginia smiled, touching his cheek. "I'm perfect. Everything is perfect." Morgan glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. "And our little secret, all well?" Virginia placed a hand over her stomach. "Very well. Though I'm beginning to think we should tell Mrs. Winters soon. She's already suspicious of my morning absences from breakfast." Morgan chuckled. "She probably knew before we did. That woman doesn't miss much." Later that night, when the last guests had departed and they were finally alone in their new home, Morgan carried Virginia over the threshold of the master bedroom she had so lovingly decorated. "Welcome home, Mrs. Hayes," he murmured, setting her gently on her feet. Virginia looked up at her husband, still hardly believing this happiness was hers. "Our home," Morgan's hand drifted to rest over her stomach, "for all three of us." The months of Virginia's pregnancy passed with a mixture of joy and anxiety. Dr. Peterson insisted on examining her more frequently than a typical expectant mother, always expressing surprise at her continued good health and the normal development of the baby. "It's truly remarkable," he admitted during her 6th month. "The scarring is still present, but the baby seems to have found enough healthy tissue to implant and grow." Morgan never missed an appointment, his steady presence a constant comfort to Virginia. At home, he was endearingly protective, insisting she rest frequently and enlist help for household tasks as her body changed to accommodate their growing child. Mrs. Winters, now officially informed of the pregnancy, was equally vigilant, preparing special meals rich in nutrients and brewing herbal teas said to strengthen the womb. The entire ranch seemed to operate around Virginia's well-being, with even the roughest cowboys speaking in hushed tones when she was resting on the veranda. Winter gave way to spring, and as the land renewed itself, Virginia's body expanded with the miracle growing within. She spent hours in the nursery Morgan had added to their home, arranging tiny garments and dreaming of the child who would soon fill the handcrafted cradle beside their bed. In late April, just as the wildflowers began carpeting the hills around the ranch, Virginia went into labor. Despite Dr. Peterson's warnings about a potentially difficult birth, her labor progressed smoothly. Morgan remained by her side throughout, wiping her brow, holding her hand through contractions, and whispering words of encouragement and love. After 6 hours of labor, Virginia delivered a healthy baby girl, her lusty cries filling the bedroom as Dr. Peterson placed her on Virginia's chest. "She's perfect," the doctor said, genuine amazement in his voice. "Absolutely perfect." Morgan, tears streaming unashamedly down his face, leaned over to place a gentle kiss on his daughter's head, then on his wife's lips. "You did it, Virginia. You brought our miracle into the world." Virginia gazed down at their daughter, taking in the tiny fingers, the wisp of dark hair, the perfect bow of her mouth. She looks like you, she whispered. She has your strength, Morgan replied. What shall we call her? Virginia considered for a moment. Hope, she said finally. Hope Elizabeth Hayes. Morgan nodded, his throat too tight with emotion to speak. Dr. Peterson, finishing his examination of both mother and child, cleared his throat. Mrs. Hayes, I owe you an apology. Clearly, my diagnosis was incomplete. While the scarring I observed was real, I should never have spoken in such absolute terms about your ability to bear children. Virginia smiled tiredly. Thank you, doctor. Perhaps medicine still has much to learn about the human body. And the human heart, Morgan added, his gaze never leaving his wife and daughter. News of Hope's birth spread quickly through Redemption Springs and the surrounding ranches. Visitors came bearing gifts and congratulations, many expressing amazement at the miracle baby who had defied medical expectations. As spring deepened into summer, Virginia recovered her strength. Hope thrived, growing plump on her mother's milk and basking in the adoration of her parents and the extended family of the Hayes Ranch. One evening in late June, Virginia sat nursing Hope on the veranda as the setting sun painted the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. Morgan joined them, settling into the chair beside her and stretching his long legs out before him with a contented sigh. Mrs. Winters says Jackson is sweet on the new schoolteacher, he commented, reaching over to stroke Hope's cheek with a gentle finger. Virginia smiled. Miss Turner. She seems lovely, very dedicated to her students, Morgan nodded. I was thinking we might invite them both for Sunday dinner next week, give them a chance to become better acquainted in a comfortable setting. Playing matchmaker, Mr. Hayes, Virginia teased. Everyone deserves the happiness we've found, he replied simply. Virginia shifted Hope to her shoulder, patting the baby's back gently. I never imagined I could be this happy, she admitted. That day in Dr. Peterson's office, I thought my life was over. Morgan reached for her free hand, entwining their fingers. And now I know it was just beginning. She looked out over the ranch, the land they would someday pass to their daughter. Do you think Hope might have siblings someday? Dr. Peterson seems to think it's possible now. I think anything is possible, Morgan said, lifting her hand to his lips. But whether Hope remains our only child or we're blessed with a dozen, I have everything I need right here. Virginia leaned over to kiss him, their daughter nestled safely between them. From barrenness to abundance, from despair to joy, the journey had been unexpected, but she wouldn't change a moment of it. As twilight descended over the Hayes Ranch, Virginia O'Malley Hayes knew with absolute certainty that some futures couldn't be predicted by doctors or defined by conventional wisdom. Some futures had to be claimed with courage, nurtured with love, and built one day at a time with the right partner by your side. Hope cooed softly against her shoulder, and Morgan's hand remained warm in hers. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them together, the family that defied expectations, the love that redefined possibility. 2 years later, Virginia stood on the veranda of the Hayes Ranch house, watching as Morgan taught their daughter to pet a gentle foal in the nearby corral. Hope's delighted giggles carried on the summer breeze, and Virginia's hand drifted to her swollen belly, where their second miracle grew strong. Dr. Peterson had been astonished when Virginia announced her second pregnancy, but this time his prognosis was cautiously optimistic. Lightning has struck twice, Mrs. Hayes, he had said. Perhaps we should all be more careful about pronouncing limitations on what the human body can achieve. Virginia smiled at the memory as Morgan lifted Hope onto his shoulders and headed toward the house. Her family impossible by medical decree, yet undeniably real and thriving before her eyes. Mama, Hope called, waving excitedly. Horsey nice. Very nice, Virginia agreed as they reached the veranda. She accepted Morgan's kiss, then reached up to take Hope into her arms. How are my girls today? Morgan asked, his hand joining hers on her rounded stomach. We are all perfect, Virginia replied, feeling the flutter of movement beneath their joined hands. Absolutely perfect, Morgan's eyes, still as blue and captivating as the day they had met, crinkled with happiness. I told you that day on the hillside, Virginia Hayes. You're my forever, children or no children. Virginia leaned into his embrace, their daughter between them and their son growing strong within her. And you are mine, Morgan Hayes, my unexpected blessing, my impossible dream come true. As the sun set over the Hayes ranch, painting the sky in shades of promise, Virginia knew that some futures couldn't be predicted or prescribed. The most beautiful ones were those built on love that saw beyond limitations, on faith that defied expectations, and on the courage to claim happiness wherever it might be found. For Virginia and Morgan Hayes, that future stretched before them like the endless Arizona sky, boundless, beautiful, and filled with possibilities that no doctor could ever diagnose, no pessimist could ever dismiss, and no hardship could ever diminish. It was a future built on love, the kind that said forever, and meant it, through every joy and sorrow, every triumph and challenge. The kind that saw a woman's worth beyond her ability to bear children, yet celebrated the miracle when it unexpectedly occurred. And as hope reached up to touch Virginia's face with tiny fingers, her eyes so like her father's sparkling with innocence and trust, Virginia knew that the greatest diagnoses in life came not from doctors, but from hearts brave enough to see beyond limitations to the endless possibilities that love could create.